start out. I thought today was a little bit of a relief. We've been trying to get to this point for many, many months, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to represent Dr. Eastman in response to the charges today. I'm not going to comment on anything about the evidence or the court's rulings, just that there's a great deal of excitement about where we are, that we've begun the process, and we hope to have a successful ending.
Dr. Eastman, have you been contacted by the federal DOJ or called before the grand jury in regards to, either these proceedings or something else?
No, I have not.
Neither. And no, in regards to not whether it's alleged misconduct with the bar or any other topics?
No. The DOJ obviously has the referral from the January 6th committee, which we think was pretty specious and partisan, but we've not had any attempt by DOJ to bring it before the grand jury.
And, now reflecting on what the charges are and the memo that you wrote, and do you regret what happened? Do you still stand by what you wrote?
Well, as I've pointed out on a number of occasions, the memo was an internal discussion of a bunch of options that were being talked about all over the country. We wanted to get it all down so we could have an assess. And I've repeatedly said in public, in print, that the memo actually doesn't recommend anything. There are 9 different scenarios in it, none of which recommended it. That, it's hard to say what the advice was. Is it one of the 5 that said Biden wins, or one of the 4 that says Trump wins? So it was a scenarios memo, which is what lawyers are expected to do, kind of lay out what are the options we have before us to consider.
The whole country dynamic really changed as a result of some of the efforts by President Trump and his legal team to overturn the results of the election. What do you say to, now looking back?
So I challenge the way you premise that question. Our efforts were not to overturn the election. My efforts repeatedly were to ensure that the investigations into the illegality that was obvious in the election did not affect the outcome. And I specifically say in the memo in that particular scenario, if we refer it back to the state legislatures, and they find that the illegality was not sufficient to have affected the outcome, they recertify Biden wins. My effort, and many of the efforts, was designed to make sure we had a fulsome investigation into the kind of anomalies and serious problems that everybody witnessed.
There have been investigations since then, since your memo. Do you believe now, without a doubt, that those anomalies were taken care of? That they're
I do not. You look at Justice Gableman's investigation up in Wisconsin. He specifically identifies not just illegality, but fraud that had resulted as a result of that illegality in greater numbers in the margin of the election in that state. I think one of my witnesses coming up, Garland Favorito, is on the same thing in Georgia. So there are huge problems, and I think it's important, quite beyond the partisan controversies over the former president and the existing politics, to identify whether our election system has such vulnerabilities that we can trust anymore.
Are you concerned for the upcoming election?
I certainly am, yeah.
And do you plan to take any actions as a result of that?
The reason people say, why don't you just move on? And the reason I stayed focused on trying to identify what went on is so that if there are holes in the election system that undermine its credibility, that we fix those holes so we can have confidence again in the election. Because the elections are the way we, the people, exercise our sovereign authority over our government. And if they're not valid, we're no longer citizens, we're subjects.
Do you plan to represent President Trump in the upcoming election?
That certainly depends on President Trump. If anybody of that caliber that asks you to take them on as representation, any good lawyer would have to think twice and say, well, that's what I'm here as a lawyer for.
Anybody else?
Doctor,
I don't want to.
one just quick look.
Anybody else have questions? Because I could do this all day.
Thank you. Come here, please.
Keep them coming.
The pictures without me talking.
Yeah. You're good, sir.
All right. I think President Trump recognized the vulnerabilities in the election system. He wanted a fair shot to challenge those vulnerabilities because if he in fact had won, that's the way the American people wanted the direction of the government to go. So I hope he's watching it, and I expect he's pleased that I'm standing up and describe why it was that we were fighting as we were.
Do you have a message to President Biden?
I'll give the same message I offered President Biden publicly back in December of 2020. He ought to be the first one that welcomes a fulsome investigation of the allegations, because if he prevailed after a fulsome allegation, any question about the legitimacy of the presidency would be gone. President Bush welcomed the media's, subsequent recount of the Florida electors and then confirmed his win, that was good for Bush as well as good for the country. I wish we had something like that here.
What role do you think you did or did not play in what happened on January 6th, both leading up to it in the memo and other stances?
Well, the memos weren't even known to anybody except 2 or 3 people inside the Trump campaign until October of 2021. So they had no role whatsoever in what happened at the Capitol. And nor did my speech. There was one allegation leveled by me against me in Colorado where I was teaching that I caused the insurrection. I said, well, that's interesting. 500,000 people come from all over the country to hear the president give what may be his last speech as president, and I so incite the crowd that they leave before Trump speaks. I mean, it was rather ludicrous.
Where did you go after the
We
president
went
spoke?
back. I went back to the suite room in the Willard because we were still working on assembling, various consequences of the illegality that we knew had occurred.
And now, what do you think about what happened on January 6th? I mean, we've had hundreds of people arrested in this. They've gone to prison. There are trials over this. I mean, Greg Jacob even sent this email to you, because of your bullshit, we're now under siege.
Yeah, and then Greg Jacob later apologized for that. If you look at the next email, it was an intense moment. No, I have never supported the violence that went on, but the right of the people to protest peacefully, the right of the people to petition their government for redress of grievances, that's the language from the First Amendment. And for the folks that were doing that, I fully support their right to do it. Just as I support the right of the protesters that are down the street from my home, who've been going on for a year. I wish they wouldn't do it, but they have a constitutional right to do that.
But to be clear, you don't support the people who tried to breach the Capitol, the assaults on police
I
officers.
don't support the people that breached the Capitol and committed violence in the Capitol. I think there's a big dispute on how many breached the Capitol versus how many walked in the doors that were open for them, as we're seeing with some of the additional video that's coming out.
What do you in your defense? Who do you plan to call? I know that some of it's in your briefs, but who are the witnesses so we can get it on camera? Who are you planning to call next?
We've got several different types of witnesses. So we've got factual witnesses or recipient witnesses that'll testify about some of the factual issues that are at play in this case, some of the election irregularities and improprieties. We'll have people testify about that. We're allowed to put on what we call character evidence witnesses to talk about what they know about Mr. Eastman and an expert witness as well. And so they'll be our main witnesses. There's many witnesses on both sides, so we expect to get through the process efficiently, and we look forward to continuing to work up the case.
And do you see this as the final ruling from Judge Rowland, or are you assuming that this is going to go to the Supreme Court, that this is going to be appealed?
Well, we'll see. That always remains to be seen. But there's a process that allows us or either party to seek some relief beyond the result of where this comes out with Judge Rowland. We appreciate the work that the court's putting in on this so far, and we'll see where it goes. We'll certainly keep all of our options open, and we won't stop fighting until we get a fair result that is consistent with the facts and the law.
Scarlett? Anything else that you'd like to add?
I would just add that every American should have the objective of having a free and fair and fulsome election system. Everybody wants their votes counted. Everybody wants to participate in the process, and that's really what you're hearing today. And then in terms of, you heard my opening remarks, really I'm a defender of lawyers and legal profession. Lawyers do this every day. They get up and advocate. They debate with the other side. There's typically 2 sides, maybe 10 sides to a case. And lawyers get in there because they have to act as the most zealous advocate on behalf of their clients. And that's all you're seeing here. And I think I'm hopeful that idea will carry the day, that Judge Rowland will see through what Dr. Eastman was doing here and find that it was consistent with his obligations to his clients and his colleagues.
Do you think the state bar is overreaching?
I don't know that I would call it overreaching. We disagree with the contentions they've made in the disciplinary charges. We disagree with the allegations they're making in the case, but we're here, and at this point there's no reverse, and so we're ready to stand and continue to put up our best effort in reacting to the charges.
And we were asking if you had any messages for anyone. Do you have any messages for Judge Carter, the judge who ruled on this and seems to perhaps have a different take from some others?
So, the only thing I'll say about Judge Carter is what was said in our appellate brief. I think his ruling was clearly erroneous. That's why we appealed it.
Anything else, folks?
Good.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thanks for your interest, everybody. Yeah, we'll see you maybe throughout the week.